thanking. Okay, so let me start off by thanking everybody for taking the time. I know that's a very busy week for most of you. And also to thank the committee, the key committee members. We had 5 people that were working on this since we started. I think it was in June 1, I believe, John. And it was intended to be a 4-month project, but a circumstance had it, and other matters had to be cared for. Here we are. So it is complete, but I want to reassure everyone that none of these studies are ever complete. New information comes to the forefront, and it needs to be incorporated, looked at, and that's one of the wonderful parts of these studies. What this study does is really provide a foundation of information, and there's no doubt there'll be other information that will be forthcoming over the next months and perhaps years. So, but in particular, I want to thank John and Rich, and I'll get back to you in a moment, John, but also Alexandra Don, who really was extremely helpful, the Deputy Commissioner of DCD, Ray Collins from Eversource was extremely helpful, Reuben Spencer, and in the early part of the study, Joy Weber from Orsted. And so those were some of the key people. On page Roman number 2 and the forward, you'll see the list of people and companies that also participated. So with that said, John, why don't you introduce Rich and talk a little bit about your company and your experience in this field?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. This is John McAllister. I'm the principal of McAllister Marine Engineering. We work with the Chamber and all those folks that Tony had mentioned on this study. I'll start off by introducing Rich Baldwin, who is our lead man of the Brain Trust. So Rich, why don't you tell us about your background and your offshore wind experience?
Hi, my name is Rich Baldwin. I'm a senior environmental scientist. Got like about 35 years of experience. Going back to then how it got into the offshore wind. Oh, I'm also an adjunct professor at UC Stony Brook here on Long Island. I've been pretty heavily involved in offshore wind back to the Cape Wind days. Really my areas of expertise are the ports and harbor infrastructures that's going to be required, the logistics, and also the supply chain that we're hoping to develop within the state. I've been working pretty closely with other states. We've got experience with in the Jersey Strategic Plan. North Carolina put together a big plan. Their Department of Commerce. We've worked on Virginia's strategic plan. So the idea was both the team, and John and I have been working together for seems like a long time. And that was one of the strengths of McAllister Marine Engineering is we have a lot of this experience. We kind of know what people are thinking.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Rich. So yeah, Rich and I have been working together since I think about 2012 or 2013 at a previous firm. And so we got involved back looking at Cape Wind, and we were involved in the design and construction of the New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal, which is kind of the first purpose-built marshaling facility in southern New Bedford Harbor. Just to give kind of frame of reference where things were back then, we were looking at what 1.5 megawatt turbines, and now we're looking at 14 megawatt turbines. And the scale is not linear either; it's exponential. It's just the components are just getting much bigger, much more massive, and that goes to what Tony says about this needing to be a living, breathing document, because innovation is going to keep occurring. There are going to be new opportunities developing from innovation, from changes in the market, and this is a snapshot in time for where things are now and where we're projecting things going. But obviously, we don't have the crystal ball, so it needs to be flexible and adjustable. But we spent the past 6 months working pretty diligently and meeting with many folks and different advisors throughout the industry and within the state to get this picture and develop this study. And we think we put out a pretty solid product. So with that, Tony, I think pass it along.
Good. I just want to give one other shout out to Quinn and Harry. They were very helpful in setting up this conference, and also they can take credit for the what I think is a very attractive design on the cover. So thank you. I'm not sure if they're on or not, but they deserve credit for that. So, and then one other final thought here. Obviously, we're at the beginning of a very new, exciting industry. It's new to America, with the exception of the 5 windmills over at Block Island. These are windmills of a completely different nature, and they're massive. And so it's a new industry. We're not competing against anybody for it except other states up and down the coast. So, and John can speak to New London and the vicinity, and also Bridgeport, and how that will work. So why don't we just, so that we're not delaying people too long, why don't we just open this up for questions and see where it goes? And please, and this is not, by the way, we're going to have a forum on this in the new year. We don't have a date set yet, but John and Richard and other key people will be part of that forum. So, okay, so let's, any questions?
I have my hand up, Tony.
Go for it, Senator.
Okay. So we're all getting used to trying to be polite with our hands raised. So I'm curious. I read the report. I read the summary of the report, and there were a couple of different spots. One, the old Norwich State Hospital property, only the side on the Preston side, which is the larger parcel, with the number of parcels, but the larger piece. And then the Mashantucket parcel, which is a 500-acre parcel in Waterford. Are we bringing in the people who own these particular parcels to see if they have any other projects that are being prepared for them? I'm just curious on that. I have one more question after
Well,
that.
yeah, I can answer that. Yes, we met with them, with both the Mohicans and the Mashantuckets. And the 500-acre lot in Quaker Hill, Waterford, is industrial zoned, and certainly could be made available for development related or unrelated to this business. And I also met with the Mohicans, and they obviously are very interested in the Preston property and remain so, but they also wanted to talk a little bit about the industry itself and what it means for them. And hopefully nothing will happen, but should something happen that property doesn't go forward, then this is certainly one of perhaps many options.
Am I
Can I just piggyback on Tony's response, please?
Yeah.
Just want to be very clear. This is a kind of a feasibility study. When we looked at these parcels, we looked at it only from an offshore wind perspective. So they might have better and more economic uses. That's kind of for the property owner and other developers to explore. But we just looked at, because you need large tracts of land, you need waterfront access, obviously. So there's certain criteria that we just wanted to identify where there are some parcels that could have some potential. And we, as much as we could, reached out to some of the property owners. We weren't able to reach out to everybody in the time span that we had. But I just wanted to make that clear, that just because something's included in this report doesn't mean it's going to be used for offshore wind, or that the property owners are planning on that either.
Okay, and my second question is relative to the old Dow Chemical site. Did you look at that old Dow Chemical site, which is along the water, but it has rail in between that, and it's zoned industrial. It's on the water. So I didn't know if that was a piece of the puzzle or if that was not something that fit into the criteria that you were looking at. Just a question.
Sure. The answer is that an attempt was made to reach out, but it wasn't successful. But it doesn't mean that cannot still happen.
Okay.
As we said earlier, clearly this is going to be a living document, And
And-
John, go ahead.
Yeah, what didn't I believe Cashman Marine Contracting had some plans for that property they just announced a month or two ago. Is that the different one?
No, that is not something that is being developed yet on the old Dow Chemical site. There's still
Okay, maybe I was.
there's a lot of open area there relative to industry of one sort or another. They do have a styrene producer there, which is a good business, but I just want to say that, we all have, like, there are a number of parcels in Montville that I'd like to see developed that are on the water. So I just want to make sure that this document can be added to or subtracted from relative to whatever we can have going on. And then my last question is relative to what kind of business are you looking to put in these places? Are we looking for subcontractors relative to the off-wind shore business? Are we looking for those that will directly work on the offshore wind projects in the water? What are we looking for here?
So generally,
Yeah.
so generally, Senator, is if your property is upstream of a bridge, such as the properties we're talking about, you can't really use them for the marshaling, for the erection of the big chunks, just because of vertical height restrictions and things like that. So I think both of those and a lot of these were for various parts of the industry, and call them tier 1 through tier 4 manufacturers. I mean, the 500 acre part would be great for a tier 1 manufacturing facility, because you could build whatever it is, and then you could barge them down the stream horizontally to New London or to other marshaling ports. But that's one of the things that we're seeing is a lot of interstate competition for these really big components. So it could also be a really good manufacturing facilities properties for the subcontractors, if you will, who are making the smaller components, which will then feed into, and again, some of those we could use the intermodal transport system depending on the size of the components to
Small is a relative term too, just because
Right.
Like Mohawk Northeast up in New London, they manufacture some of the rings that go around these things. That's considered a small component, but it's still, they think they're like 36 feet in diameter. They're massive, but they're smaller compared to the whole superstructure.
Right. Well, thank you for that. I know that Chairman Butler said that he's glad people are recognizing the value of that Quaker Hill Waterford property. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Other questions? Senator Formica, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Tony. Yes, I do. Thank you very much for the crafters of the report, although I've not read it yet. I just was notified of this, a few hours ago, so I'll try to get on it. My question is related to the comment that we're not competing with anybody. We are competing with people. We're competing with the manufacturing opportunities up and down the coast. And my first comment would be related to the initiative through COG, probably almost 10 years ago, when we had a rail committee and worked hard to support Congressman Courtney's efforts to get that Tiger grant to improve the infrastructure of the freight line, moving from the pier up through Norwich, Willimantic, Stafford Springs, all of the areas touched by Senator Austin's question. The report, I hope, touches on the opportunities to connect that rail. I think that's part of a forgotten initiative here as this pier gets built out. So I want to make sure that opportunity, because assembly plants and manufacturing plants in Columbia and areas to the north of the pier are going to be, very important in the coming 5 years or so once this thing gets underway. And the second comment with regard to competition is that of the fishing industry, which has been there for generations and generations. And I hope that the report touches on the opportunities to work collaboratively with the fishing industry and placing of these turbines so it doesn't disrupt some of the prolific scallop grounds that have been developed over the last 15 years, some of the ground fishing opportunities, and the navigation opportunities for the fishing vessels that would be, I'm sure, part of the Coast Guard's purview, but opportunities for them to safely fish and drag and net. And then the last comment that I'll make is in Europe, we have an opportunity to learn from a lot of their mistakes. They are a mature industry here. To Tony's point, we are an emerging industry. And whenever you are an emerging beginning industry, there are opportunities and also there are struggles. And one of the struggles that go on in Europe is that about 70 or 80% of the insurance claims that happen in the European offshore wind market are a result of cable issues. And I hope that the report touches on the opportunity to really focus on that problem before we lay those cables so that we can have a good opportunity to be more successful than they have been and also mitigate some of the problems with the connectivity that may exist as we try to run cables through this thing. So I thank you, Tony, for the initiative in establishing this report, and I look forward to reading it and hope to be involved as a member of the leadership of the Energy Committee. We have been working very hard to try to make sure that offshore wind is established here in Connecticut and move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And you definitely play a key role in this whole process as in your role as leader of the Energy Committee. So we'll be talking more about this as we go forward. Anyone else? I can't see hands here for some reason, but so just speak up. John or Rich, do you want to comment at this point about the comments so far?
Yeah, let me just follow up on that. So with respect to fishing, that is a major industry-wide concern. And this study, we don't touch on that so much because we're looking really near shore and on the inland where Connecticut can develop. So that's more of I don't want to say it's a federal issue. I guess it is a federal issue through Baldwin when they get their permits. But they'll see different developers as they're going through in the permitting process. They're orienting the layouts of their grids. You know, they're going to have a nautical mile in between each of them. I think they've changed the direction of how they're going to do it, keep fishing. But that's not really the focus of this study because, again, that's for all the developers, and that's going to be a federal issue. We were looking at how Connecticut itself can have the economic impact of developing ports, supply chain, and workforce development issues. And then also similarly on the cable connection areas, again, that's the run where they come ashore and everything is through the kind of federal and the state permitting authorities. That's a little bit beyond of our scope of what we're talking about, but they're very valid points and they make a huge impact on the feasibility, the viability of a project. And what we don't want, speaking industry-wide, is to make those same mistakes that they made in Europe and have it fall flat where it just doesn't reach its potential because, you know, people didn't plan this out thoughtfully and they made the same mistakes that could have been avoided, and that has a negative impact on industry and it doesn't reach its potential. That's a very good point.
And then I just real quick, I'd like to also amplify on your comment about the intermodal and the rail. I think a really important part and one of the strengths of the state is the intermodal transport system. So we don't want everybody to think that this is a coastal industry. We want somebody who can make specialized nuts and bolts, which turn a different color when they get to a certain torque or whatever, you know, the specialty is. It can be way up away from from the ocean or from the rivers, but still, you know, play a strong role in the offshore wind industry. So again, just want to make sure everybody in the state is comfortable that it's just not a coastal industry.
So I just want to add one other thought, if you hold on a second, Evan. Senator Formica, one of our plans, well, it was actually supposed to happen last November, is to go to Grimsby, England, where a town not unlike New London, that's become the center of offshore wind for the English Channel and the North Sea. They have training centers there. They have a number of factories around that area that produce various components. So, but that trip has been postponed until the spring and until the numbers, the COVID numbers become more, well, less better. I'll leave it at that. So, but that'll be a trip that some of you might want to think about joining. Go ahead now, Evan.
Thank you. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Evan Ward. I'm the head of the Department of Marine Sciences at the University of Connecticut. So just to address Senator Formica's comment there, we are being funded by Ørsted and Vineyard Wind. Well, we used to be Vineyard Wind, now Avangrid Renewables, to conduct research out on the sites with respect to fisheries and to develop strategies to accommodate both offshore wind and fisheries. So we'll be doing that probably starting next summer, and that will carry in for a few years. Thanks.
That's great.
It was interesting as, Professor Ward, I don't know if you've seen the work that was done for the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, but we did look at a lot of the fisheries data, and it's pretty clear. A lot of them, I'd love your opinion, is that it seems like a lot of the fisheries are moving north. They're just basically following the cooler water, right? So, I mean, and I've always thought that we should kind of embrace offshore wind because maybe it'll hopefully slow down that warming of the New York Bight and the cold pool.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of components to consider. That's one of them, obviously. And there's a good amount of data over the last few years that has been produced by various universities. The University of Massachusetts, Rutgers has put out some. I've got contacts at the University of Delaware as well. So yeah, we're collaborating together to sort of develop a holistic picture, which will come together in years to come, but not too far out.
John or Rich, would you talk a little bit about, it just amazes me, but talk a little bit about the number of different components that go into the assembling one of these windmills?
Yeah, sure. So there's some of the larger components you see, and each one of them has their subcomponents. So the big ones you talk about, you're going to have your foundation pieces, either monopiles. There's a couple other ones. There's jacket foundations. Then there's gravity-based solution ones. There's a wide range of those to your foundations, but that's essentially how you secure it to the ground. Or if it's floating, they have a couple different ways of anchoring a floating foundation. Then you have your transition piece that comes up, bridges between the foundation and the actual tower sections themselves that rise up. Then you're gonna have your nacelle, and that's kind of the brains of, that's kind of the hub where the blades attached to it in the middle, and that's where the majority of the components are. I want to say there's some ungodly amount of tens of thousands of subcomponents that go into that, and that's where, if you think about it, there's going to be 100 turbines in each of these developed areas, and there's going to be, at least what we're looking at 18 right now. So if you multiply that out, if you can get involved on developing a subcomponent or a couple of subcomponents of that nacelle to these suppliers, because there's really only 3 big manufacturers, at least in the European market, and that we're projecting in the American market for manufacturing these wind turbines. It's GE, MHI Vestas, and Siemens Gamesa. So if you can get into their supply chain with a tier 2 or tier 3 manufacturing capability, they also, not only do you supply this emerging U.S. market, but you're supplying the European market, which is still expanding, and there's even the Asian market right now is really starting to explode. However, there's different turbines being used over there. So I mean, we're talking there's opportunities for tens of thousands of components that need to be manufactured, delivered, and they're very sensitive, very advanced manufacturing pieces. There's not a lot of off-the-shelf stuff that you get. They need to be able to withstand these harsh, extreme marine conditions. They're and they have all different components. Again, things are developing too and innovating. So there's always an opportunity to make something better or to help facilitate, make things easier for the operators or even for when they're maintaining.
And to kind of amplify on what John is saying, it's an interesting thing is if you look at the kind of the different components of the industry, there's a big wind blade manufacturing facility in Hull, England. I think we're trying to go there also, aren't we, Tony?
We were, yeah.
And some of my UK colleagues, it was interesting. They pointed out that, that facility may, provide like 1,000 jobs, which is great. But the secondary and tertiary kind of supply chain for the blades is actually kind of minimal. It's a bunch of composites and balsa wood. There's a worldwide balsa wood shortage apparently now because of this, and a few nuts and bolts. I mean, it's good stuff, but again, that supply chain is fairly shallow. So there's not a lot of, induced jobs and things like that. Whereas, like John is saying, the turbines, even these transition pieces, there's a lot of secondary steel that gets welded on. So you kind of, there's parts of the supply chain we were part of the manufacturing we'd really like to bring in because it just has so many more depth of jobs basically.
Other thoughts or questions from anyone?
Tony, I'm back up again with another
Go ahead.
question.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you very much. So the job components that you just talked about that I think were important to bring up, when I looked at the full-time jobs for the offshore wind relative to New London, you had 147, I believe, jobs in your report around that number. But certainly there were a lot of jobs relative to the construction of the turbines themselves.
Right. So the 147 was operation and maintenance. So that's after construction period is in there. That's a 25-year lifespan when they're operated and maintained.
Yeah, I came up with 50, so I'd like to understand that 147 number when I looked at the full-time equivalent jobs, and the indirect jobs relative to that was like 471. Was that what the number was? I'm don't have the report right in front of me, but I've always been saying.
Yeah.
Say it again.
410.
All right. So again, are they going to use out of those numbers, the indirect jobs I could see being in the community, the 147 that you have, are those so technical that nobody that lives here is going to be able to get that job? Or are we planning on training local people to do that job? Because that's important that we figure out a way. I mean, we did lose a number of full-time equivalent jobs at New London Pier relative to the longshoremen. I'd like to make sure that we're hiring people for those full-time jobs. We know the construction jobs will help out with some of our local guys. The full-time jobs, are they going to be local people that get those jobs? Is there a
So the 127 jobs that we're looking at, that is statewide. So that's based on the 2 gigawatts of what the state has authorized. So it's not just because some of the Park City wind projects are going to be deployed out of Bridgeport.
Okay. So I'm pretty close to accurate on the 50 jobs at New London, full-time operations and maintenance.
Yes, and these are projections. So it's based on the National Renewable Energy Labs. They have a jobs and economic development impact model. So we just played around with some things. And again, it depends on the type of turbines that you're going to be using. So if they go with 15 megawatt turbines, you're going to have a couple less than you would with a 12 megawatt. So you might have a few less jobs. And again, technology is going to change. But you're correct. The indirect jobs will most likely develop centered around the ports, the marshaling ports in the manufacturing areas. What was I going to say? So with respect to how to capture these jobs, there's the biggest thing that's most important for offshore wind is something called GWO training, Global Wind Offshore. It's a worldwide standard. It's a safety standard, and it teaches it just teaches you how to safely operate and navigate at sea. So there's like helicopter, you have to like practice if a helicopter crashes. It's actually pretty amazing if you watch some of the things. So there's already programming Groton that does it. Sea Survival USA, I believe, is the name of the firm. So they have that capability to do that training, and they have a pipeline for that. In Bridgeport, they're also developing a program through Park City Wind Project. So those are the two most critical. That's your entry into the door. Once you have that, then it's your skill set. Can you maintain these things? So as part of what we recommend, there are some training programs being developed. So both the Revolution Wind Project and the Park City Wind Project, as part of their commitments, have put forth some training programs. So they're working with some of the workforce investment boards on developing those training programs. And as it is, there's the 127 direct jobs statewide. It looks like to us, the programs that they're developing within, we have like about a 5-year window to do it. We think that they can actively achieve that without, be able to provide a solid pipeline of talent to work on these problems, these projects.
Local talent, local talent.
Local talent.
People that live here
Absolutely.
in Connecticut already.
And I think, and it was what I think sort of not surprised us, but it's funny. Some of the developers, they've always said, oh, the real jobs are all based in the O&M, the operation and maintenance. That's where the real money is.
No.
It lasts for 25 years, but it's only like 6 jobs, right? I mean, that's the problem with it.
Well, it's a little bit more, but yeah.
One of the things that we really are pushing is, is a lot of our state workers, the machinists and the welders, they already have all the skills. And so it would, one of the things that we're going to see is the U.S. industry is going to start requiring more and more local content. And sometimes it's actually hard to find initial local content because, we don't have a tower manufacturing facility or a nacelle assembly facility. But, our maritime industry, they build nuclear submarines and, we build jet airplanes and things like that. So that's always been, I really tried to get that across in the supply chain and the workforce development part that's one of the state's greatest strengths is our workers who have the experience. They just have to change it a little bit to go, into offshore wind. They're not going to have to retool entire factories and retrain people and things like that. So it makes it easy for hopefully these manufacturing companies to come here.
Well, and I appreciate that. The O&M component of things, many of us have been talking about how do we make sure that the Port Authority hires for O&M, whether it's Eversource and Ørsted or whomever is hiring these, that we're going to have a local workforce component of things. And the programs that you just talked about, the training that is required for work out in a maritime environment, something akin to an oil rig down in the southern part of the United States. Is that the same kind of training? Is that an ability for us to have that same kind of training for this area here? I mean, we have somewhat different weather, a little bit colder in the wintertime, but we certainly have the bad storms that are down south right now.
And let me answer part of what Kathy is saying here. I was over at Survival Systems 2 weeks ago and over to observe a group of people training for this industry. There were 20 young people there. and they were there for the day. And it just was amazing at the rigor they go through to make sure that, for example, if they're out working on a mill, if they fall into the water, are they capable of surviving? Are they going to lose their head, or are they going to stay calm? So I observed this process for over an hour, and there's going to be a ton of that kind of trading, and that's going to create a local employee pool, because you're not going to drive from Massachusetts to do that kind of trading. You're going to do it here, and so I think that there will be a significant impact, a ripple effect, actually, throughout the various companies that can pivot a little bit or a lot, depending, towards the new industry. So, but if you haven't been to Survival Systems, it's an amazing place. It's worth a visit, and they're already doing some trading for one of the offshore wind companies.
Is that the one that's in Groton?
Yes, it's at the airport
I've been
property at Groton.
Yep, I've been there. So
And then
I
just-
just, go ahead,
Just
John.
to double back about for the O&M, it won't be the Port Authority that will be providing the O&M. It's developers themselves, so they won't have a say on
Right.
who gets hired. But I believe, and I can't speak for the developers, there are local hiring commitments as part of when they put in their bids.
I know that. I want to make sure it happens.
Right, that's true. It's commitment is one thing, action is another. You're 100% correct.
And I understand the number of jobs that we're going to have relative to construction, and I'm happy about that. But they're temporary in nature, and we need to make sure that we're hiring people long term to bolster the economy in the region, not just the construction, which I really like. I like trades a lot. They do a lot of great work for us. Just worried about.
I think the advantage Connecticut has, especially with State Pier, they had huge news this past week for getting their permits moving that forward. I mean, they're going to have a high bearing capacity facility with no overhead clearances. So, they're going to be very attractive to other developers. Right now, there's commitment from, the Ørsted Eversource joint venture. But I mean, they're going to be when those projects aren't going forward, there's probably going to be a lot of interest from other developers to use that. So you might have, it's very realistic to see a continuity of projects of, the trade workers down at State Pier just doing one project after another for 8 to 10 years straight. It could easily be, seen as having that capability, because it's such a great asset.
Right. No, I appreciate the report. Thank you for the report. I did look at it, and I did send it to both Mohegan and Mashantucket because they had the larger properties that you were talking about.
Yep.
I'm interested in seeing what other properties we can add to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, this is a living document. So, and we certainly, I know for a fact, we probably missed some items. So if there's something we missed, it would make perfect sense to update it and keep this going, because this is also, could be marketing to attract other developers. Say, hey, look, you need something. Well, they've already pre-screened this facility for you. I know that was one of the inventions that we did in one of the other states we did it for.
So are there any other questions that we'd like
Thank
to
you,
get
Tony,
to?
by the way. Thank you
You're
for the
welcome,
report.
Senator. You're welcome. Anyone else? There not be none. Let me just summarize that there's obviously a need to work on a supply chain for this new industry, and that I'm sure will be taken up by both the chamber and others. We're going to do this trip to Grimsby, which is going to be very important, because there's nothing like seeing something in action. And this small town, or small city, I guess, turned itself completely around. It was an old fishing town that ran into bad times, and it should be visited by some key people to help make sure we take full advantage of this industry. We're going to have a forum in early, well, probably mid-January, to further discuss this report and other needs that will need to be cared for to make sure we're fully embracing this industry. One of the things we don't want to have happen, America has not been in the offshore wind business in any real manner. And so for the first year or two, it's very possible we'll be importing a lot of the products for these offshore windmills from various countries. We need to do that ourselves. Connecticut is a manufacturing state, and we need to produce as much as is humanly possible for this new industry. We need to have it be our industry. So that is a lot of work is needed there. And we haven't talked about this, but one of the things that I'm very excited about is the fact that this is the beginning of really addressing climate change that is much needed. And, you know, the positive impact that these windmills and solar panels and, of course, millstone, it's a green energy. It's all needed. It's all very much needed, as we witnessed this past summer. So with that, I just see one other person there, and I wanted to thank him personally. David Tranquidia, I think I'm pronouncing your name correctly, David. Thank you so much for helping us get the word out here. This was very important. So John or Rich, do you have any parting words, or any other member of the committee that's on?
Nothing on my end. This was a very exciting study to take part of, and I think there's a lot of potential in the state. So I appreciate everyone's time.
Great.
We
Well,
appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, and we'll be hearing more from you, I'm sure. So look, folks, thank you very much for participating. I know that it is a busy week for all of you, and now you can go do your Christmas shopping. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.